John le Carre is among the most beloved espionage writers of all time, and his 1974 novel Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy is his most well-known. It's been adapted into a television series starring Alec Guinness and a film starring Gary Oldman. The story follows George Smiley, a reoccurring spy master who'd already been featured in a handful of le Carre's novels, and it depicts his attempt to uncover a mole within the British Secret Intelligence Service. There is a large cast of characters here, including a few, like Control and Smiley's protege Peter Gwilym, who carry over from previous books, but there's a whole host of new characters too. That large cast of characters can be intimidating at first, but le Carre cleverly gives each one a distinct speaking voice full of idiosyncrasies, so that readers can keep them sorted from their dialogue alone. Another challenge that this novel presents to first-time readers is all the unfamiliar spy jargon. The language of the trade brings a lot of authenticity to the story, but it can also be confusing. It's sort of like hearing two mechanics talk about engines. Their expertise comes through, but the details of their technical discussion can go right over your head at times. Still, it leaves no doubt these people know their jobs very well. The city of London provides a fantastic backdrop to the novel. This is a gloomy, dreary, early 1970s London, where everybody is wearing long rain jackets with hats and scarves all bundled up. They might drink tea or sit next to the fire in an attempt to fight off the constant chill. The weather truly shapes the tone in this book. It's always raining, or it's just about to rain, or it's just finished raining. Sometimes it's snowing in the flashbacks, but it's never sunny. Tinker Tailor is not an action-based thriller, but an intellectual one. The spy work has much more to do with securing documents and conducting interviews than it does with jumping out of airplanes or surviving dramatic gunfights. There are many scenes of agents reading reports or carefully following leads as they piece together their theories. Consequently, le Carre's novel is the quintessential slow burn, but it's never boring, just very realistic. It is a thoughtful and thematically rich story about integrity and moral disillusionment. It's about the fragility and perhaps the naivety of our moral beliefs. It suggests that sometimes, in order to hold on to our ideals, we may need to consciously accept a lie or two, especially when it comes to the lies we tell ourselves.
The first time I read this novel, it was from this Penguin edition. It's a trade version that was released shortly after the 2011 film was announced. It has a cover illustrated by Matt Taylor that features a tiered crowd moving in both directions in front of a London skyline in red. The figures are in various shades of gray, except for one individual in red meant to represent the mole, and this silhouetted individual with glasses, George Smiley. There is a foil application for his lenses and for the author's name, which is prominently displayed above the title, also in silver. The spine has le Carre displayed vertically, which is a design element that carries over to Penguin's other trade releases from the author. The three parts of the novel have a title page in Roman numerals, with a similar display used for the individual chapter numbers, with each starting on a fresh page and beginning with a simple drop caps. This version features a 1991 introduction from le Carre himself, where he discusses the initial concept for the book, which he later abandoned, some of the real-world politics that parallel events in his novel, as well as a discussion of some of the spy terminology that he allegedly coined in this very book. This 5-page introduction is spoiler-free. These Penguin copies are very nice reader editions, and with distinct cover art and consistent design, they are fun to collect. But when I had the chance to bring home the Folio Society version of the novel at a great price, I was eager to see what their illustrated hardcover edition had in store. So let's do this. Here we have Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy from the Folio Society. This book was first released in 2009 and has seen 4 printings thus far. It's presented in a plain gray paper-covered slipcase with a curved open edge to allow better access to the book. The cover is done in gray buckram, with a blocked image of the silhouettes of 4 men in a wine color, which is slightly recessed. On the spine, the author name is printed in silver above the title with another figure portrait meant to represent George Smiley, printed in a pumpkin orange. The publisher's initials are down here in silver, and the binding is appropriately finished with dark gray bands. When we open the novel, we're met by plain gray end papers and a heavier weight stock. The book is printed on Abbey wove paper, Folio's standard paper stock for the text block, which is smooth, acid-free, and comes in at a warm white color. If we bring back the Penguin edition for a brief side-by-side, we can see that the Folio Society version is bigger, with an extra 3 centimeters in both the height and the width. The text is spaced nicely in the Folio version, with more generous margins that enhance the readability. Each of the novel's 3 parts has the number spelled out in all caps here, with the individual chapter numbers spelled out as well. Each new chapter begins immediately after the previous one ends. There is no introduction in this edition, which is disappointing. Folio's intros are one of the things I most look forward to, especially when they're exclusive and feature the perspective of a unique writer or academic, and I would have appreciated one here. The interior artwork, like the cover image, is by Tim Lang. He's an artist who works in a wide variety of mediums, including film, music, paint, and pencil. Much of his artwork is presented in black and white, with his pencil portraits being especially realistic. He provides 9 interior illustrations here, and despite being talented with portraiture, there are no faces in these Le Carre novels. The compositions are designed to avoid facial detail, with figures turned away from the camera or with faces obscured or set slightly out of frame. This brings a cold tension to the images, and the deliberate choice is a suitable fit for this novel. The artwork is presented on the same paper as the text block, and the images all fall right next to the text they correspond to, which is the best way to do an illustrated novel, in my opinion. Let's take a detailed look at that artwork now. The first illustration is of George Smiley, who's had a miserable evening dining at a club with a former colleague, and he marches back home in the rain, approaching his own Bywater Street cul-de-sac. This frontispiece establishes what we'll often see from the artwork throughout the book, throughout all 3 novels in the trilogy, in fact. The rainy and cold London weather is evident in the black and white pencil artwork. The heavy shadows can blend figures in with the setting, and faces will never be in direct view, suggesting a degree of anonymity in this world of espionage. I appreciate how the sky is left unblended so that we can actually see the graphite marks, while there's careful value control for the railing, sidewalk, and road. The architectural details are most impressive here, as the precision makes everything come across as uniform, controlled, and dispassionate. The second illustration is of Field Agent Ricky Tarr in a church, which he and his Russian contact Irina use as a drop. We see him rummaging around in the back pew, trying to get at a recess behind a loose board. Again, the value control and the architectural precision are impressive in this pencil drawing. The deep shadows in the archway, the symmetry of the pews, and the wrinkles in Tarr's clothing are especially well rendered. The third image is of Peter Gwillim, Smiley's ally, who sneaks into the circus duty officer's room to examine the logbooks. The light in the room is awful, and the steel cupboard is dusty, as Gwillim quickly searches for the information he's after before he's caught. He hears voices from the hall, and here we see him look over his shoulder toward the noise. The darkness of the scene and the tension of the character are conveyed nicely in this image. The fourth illustration is from a sequence at Thursgood's boarding school. Teacher Jim Prideaux is holding a car club rally as the boys take timed laps. We can see their tire marks through the field, but way in the background and almost part of the haze is the figure of interest. As one of the boys makes his run, Jim notices this strange man along the eastern border. The trim, inconspicuous pedestrian watches them, wearing a hat and a coat, as he stands near the fence line. Later, Jim quizzes the boys on what they remember about the man, testing their powers of observation. These Thurstgood school scenes that pepper the entire novel are often heartwarming, and to me, they're vitally important to the themes of the novel. They don't seem to necessarily fit the narrative at first, but they are ultimately essential to the big ideas that this book will present. I'm glad to see them getting some representation in this artwork. The next illustration is of George Smiley's time in the Hotel Isley, when he looks over documents, poring over the past and hunting for connections. He reads, annotates, compares, and cross-references. We can see him slumped on a chair as he extends out of frame, with a cheap hotel lamp, some furniture, and piles of file folders littering the floor. Smiley is looking into the events that culminated a year ago with the loss of his friend and colleague, as well as his own dismissal from the circus. Real spies are serious about their research. The sixth illustration is another image from the Thurstgood's boarding school asides. As student Bill Roach comes back to school from music practice late, he stops by to check on his favorite teacher. From the dark, he sees something mysterious. Jim Prideaux measures precise paces from his trailer and digs up a package that was buried there earlier. The swirls in the linework of the sky and the sinister play of the trees in the background help to predict the young student's reaction to what he learns. Upon completing his desk-based research, Smiley starts speaking with former circus employees to get the full scope of the knot he's attempting to untie. First, he speaks with a field agent, Sam Collins, and here he speaks with Max, a leg man. The two former colleagues sit in a shiny new Rover, watching the children break ice on the pond on yet another cold, gray day. The reflected clouds on the windshield of the vehicle are a clever way to obscure the faces of the men in this image as they discuss the secret details of a special and off-the-books international job that Max undertook some months ago. The eighth illustration depicts a flashback as Jim Prideaux recalls the evening his last mission collapsed around him. He's caught in a firefight under floodlights in the forest, and he jumps into a Fiat to escape. Machine gun fire rips the back wheel off the car, which flips and crashes into the snow. He takes cover behind the vehicle, hoping the machine gunner will reveal his position. In the dark shadows of the overturned car, we can just make out the crouched figure. The ninth and final image is of the ultimate confrontation near the end of the novel. As always with these illustrations, we don't see any faces, but here's a man with a gun in dark clothing. He threatens another man in a white shirt, sitting on a couch with a drink and paper nearby. The domestic details, the wallpaper, the end table, and especially the folds around this armrest on the sofa are fantastic. The distortion through the cup on the coaster, the wrinkles in the fabric of the shirt, the value work on the hand, they all contribute to the realism of this drawing. The Folio Society edition of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy is fine, but to be honest, it also left me wanting more. I think I'd feel very different about it if it had a fresh introduction. The strength of this particular release may be the cohesion of the overall design. From a gray slipcase to the buckram on the cover to the end papers and the head and tail bands to the pencil artwork, the gray tones are everywhere, and if you know the story, you already know that it's appropriately nondescript. It also happens to fall nicely in series with the other books from the Carre trilogy, which I hope to take a look at in upcoming videos. When it comes to these paperback editions, I have to admit that they are very nice to read and collect, but now that I have a fancy copy from the Folio Society, I'm ready to move on from these and toss them into the box of doom, so I have a little more room for even more new books. As always, thanks for watching, and keep an eye out for future videos. When it comes to the stories you love, it's always worth upgrading your books.